50 versus 100 watt amps. What's the actual difference in terms of volume, sound, feel, and tone? This is something I've actually wondered myself for years, and I've never had the opportunity to test until today. This is the Friedman PLEX 50. This is a brand new amp from Dave Friedman, and it's essentially a clone of his favorite amp, which is a 1968 Marshall 50 watt Super Lead, also known as the Plexi. Essentially, this is a sonic clone of his personal amp that he's had for years with a few modern features thrown in. And a few weeks ago, Friedman reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to talk about this and feature it in a video, and I thought it was actually a cool opportunity to test something that I've wanted to try out for a long time, which is basically comparing a 50 watt Marshall to a 100 watt Marshall through the same cab, same guitar, to see what the actual difference is between the two amps. Now, this video is sponsored by Sweetwater, and as part of that sponsorship, we're actually giving away one of these Friedman amps. You can find out more details in the description box down below. Click that link, it'll tell you all about the giveaway and everything. You'll also find some affiliate links down there to this amp, as well as the Marshall that we're shooting it out against and the microphones we're using. It's a great way to support my channel if you like what we're doing here. Also, please subscribe. Still, according to my analytics, over 60% of the people that watch this channel on a normal basis are not subscribed, and it really does help me out when you click that red button, so thank you. The 50 is a really cool amp. It's essentially a 1968 50 watt Plexi with a few modern features. So starting with the inputs, you've got 2 inputs instead of 4, and that's because the amp is internally jumpered instead of the traditional 4-hole Marshall setup. That means that your 2 volume controls are working together like they would if you jumped the channels on another Marshall. And also on each channel, you've got a bright switch. Now what this is doing is changing or completely cutting out the bright cap, which is a very, very popular mod that has been done to these old Marshalls for years and years. It impacts the top end of the amplifier, and Dave has put this on a switch for both channels, which is cool because traditionally you would only have a bright cap on channel 1 on these old Marshalls. So you can change the value of the bright cap, or you can cut it out completely, so you can kind of dial this amp into taste. So the comparison today though, we're gonna have the bright caps set up like the original Marshall. Now the amp that we're going to be comparing the Friedman to is my Marshall. This is a 1959 HW. So it's a modern recreation of an original late 60s 100 watt Plexi. And the cab we're using today is my 412 oversized. This is one of the Hendrix oversized 412s. It's loaded with 25 watt greenback Celestions. These are the made in UK greenbacks that I put in this cabinet. All right, so I'm gonna show you the mic setup I've got here on the cabinet. If you're not a nerd, you don't care about this stuff, go ahead and skip to this point in the video. But if you are a nerd like myself and you like microphones, let me show you the setup. So here on the cab, I've got an SM57 and then the Austrian Audio OD5, which has become one of my go-to close mics for guitar cabs. I really like it. And then here, in sort of like a guitar player listening position, I've got the R88 from AEA. This is a stereo ribbon microphone. I use this thing all the time. I've got it backed off the cab there a little bit just to kind of give us sort of a listening position kind of sound. And then over here in the corners, well, let me just show you. And then over in the corners of the room, I've got a pair of TC20s from Earthworks Audio. These are Omni small diaphragm condenser microphones. I've got them set up in the corners just to get some room sound. So we're gonna be blending all the mics together for just one sort of general sound, but we can also isolate some of the mics as well so you can hear the difference. All right, here we go. Marshall, take 1. Okay, so I mentioned that the 100 watt and the 50 watt feel different to play, but what does that actually mean? Well, we're gonna cover some amp theory to get into that. So starting with the 100 watt Marshall here. This is a classic design. It's got two channels, channel 1 and channel 2, and each channel has a high and a low input. And the original idea behind this design was that the player would pick which channel they want and which input level they want to voice it for a specific guitar or specific sound. Listen to how different the two channels sound. Right now I'm plugged into the high input of channel 1, and I'll just go to 10 on my Strat here. You can tell that's like really biting, but compare that to channel 2 at the same setting on the volume knob. Way cleaner, way bassier, way more low end, and not nearly as much high end. So it didn't take players long to figure out that they could actually bridge or jump the two channels together with a small jumper cable. And basically this allows you to use both volume controls together to get the exact sort of EQ curve that you want and also the amount of gain that you want. So now with channel 1 jumped into channel 2, the two volume controls are working together. So let's say I wanted like a medium sort of broken up kind of sound that would work well with this Strat. Well, I'm gonna add a good bit of channel 2 to get some low end and some low mid punch, and a little bit of channel 1 to add some of that articulation and top end, but I'm not bringing in too much of either channel because I don't want the amp to break up all that much. Now you can start to hear how Hendrix would have gotten those big, loud, clean-ish kind of sounds with a Strat. It's blending the two channels together. But I can take it farther if I push both channels a little bit more. Now we get the amp to start to really break up. And this is where we get into that like classic Marshall sort of Kerrang kind of sound. Now there's another interesting thing with these old Marshalls, which is how to think about the volume controls. They're not actually controlling the volume in the room as much. The amp sort of stays within a pretty narrow range of overall loudness. The volumes are really more so controlling the gain of the amplifier. So with a setting like this, I'd use the onboard volume on my guitar to control how broken up or saturated the amp is. But if you check the dB meter, even though the amp is getting cleaner, in the room it's actually not getting that much quieter. So if I start on 10 on my volume control on my guitar and roll it back, the amp's gonna clean up, but it's actually gonna stay pretty loud here in the room. Now if we switch to the Friedman, I've got the controls on the front panel matched to the Marshall. And they're gonna sound similar, but what you'll probably notice is that this amp might sound more saturated and broken up compared to where we just were with the 100 watt Plexi. Now, you might not have been able to tell on the recording, but standing next to the amp and actually playing it, The 50 watt feels much more compressed and it feels more saturated. So when I rolled off my volume on my guitar, the Friedman stayed dirtier longer than the Plexi did. With the Plexi, as soon as I backed off from 10, the amp immediately cleaned up. It opened up, it had less compression and way more headroom. And that's actually one of the great things about 100 watt Plexis is they're great clean amps. A lot of people don't think of them as that, but that's how Hendrix was actually using Plexis most of the time, was to get huge, loud, clean or clean-ish sounds that would fill up a big venue. The 50 watt gets almost as loud as the 100, but it's way more saturated, broken up, and compressed. And as a result, it actually feels a little bit better to play. That compression means you can kind of like lean into the guitar a little bit more. It feels more forgiving overall. The amp feels spongier, and you have more range of gain available with the volume knob. It's not as narrow a range. So to demonstrate, I'm gonna go from 10 to 8 on the guitar's volume, and you'll hear that it's quite a bit more broken up than the Plexi was. That sound right there with the guitar at 8, I think is awesome. And that's one of the brilliant things about running an amp like this. You have your maximum amount of gain set in the amplifier itself, and then you're controlling how clean or how dirty your signal is with the actual guitar volume. No need for a boost or an overdrive pedal. In fact, with this kind of sound, if I was gonna put anything in front of the amp, it would just be a fuzz. I wouldn't even bother with a boost or an overdrive because I'm controlling my sounds from the guitar. So for example, a clean sound might be like 6 on the guitar's volume knob. And then to go into an edge of breakup sound, I might just kick it up to 7. And then for a punchy, like rhythm broken up part, I'm gonna go up to 8. And then when I want to take a solo or a lead line, I just roll the volume all the way up. So to wrap up, what are the actual differences between a 50 and a 100 watt amp? Part of it is volume. The 50 is a little bit quieter overall, about 3 to 4 dB quieter, which on paper would suggest that it is about half as quiet, but in the room, it really doesn't feel half as quiet as the 100 watt. They honestly feel about the same standing next to the cabinet. The real difference is in how the amps feel to play. The 100 watt is kind of stiff. It's a bit unforgiving, and if you're not used to playing an amp like this, it can be difficult to kind of wrap your hands around. It's really unforgiving, and you're moving a ton of air. When you do miss a note or something, it's very apparent, and it can feel a little off-putting. The 50 is still moving a ton of air. It's still plenty loud, but it feels more forgiving to play because the amp is breaking up earlier. It has less headroom. It feels more compressed. You can feel that compression under your hands when you're actually playing the guitar, and for me, in the room, it's more inspiring. I feel less exposed. It feels like the amp is giving a little bit more. It feels spongier, it feels softer. Because it's compressing sooner and has less headroom, I actually have a little bit more gain options available on tap with my guitar's volume knob. Whereas the 100 watt Plexi tends to clean up really, really quick. The 50 gives you a little bit wider spectrum of gain available with your guitar's volume knob, which I think is really cool because if you're gigging with an amp like this, I wouldn't really see the need to put some kind of overdrive or boost on your board, maybe a fuzz or something like that. But the amp is going to give you all of the overdrive that you would ever need, and it's up to you to control how much gain you're getting with your guitar's volume knob. So in the real world, I think a 50 watt is a much more usable amplifier for most people. I think for most players, there's not really a reason to own a 100 watt Plexi. It's cool. I absolutely love this amp, but I don't think I'm ever going to gig this thing. It's way too loud, and as we demonstrated, it doesn't really get any quieter. It just gets cleaner and still moves a ton of air. Even for bigger venues, this amp is going to be way overpowering. The 50 can do that thing as well, but with the addition of the master volume and a low voltage setting, which is basically a built-in variac, I can tame this amp a lot easier, which makes it more usable in a lot of gigging situations. But even still, 50 watts is a ton of power. More power, I think, than a lot of players need. But if you do need it, you have access to it. So those are the differences. What did you think? Which of these amps would you pick to play? Thanks again to Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget, we're giving one of these Friedmans away. Check out the link in the description for more information on how to get entered into that. I'll also have links to the 1959 HW and the microphones and everything that we're using in today's video. And also, while you're down there, please subscribe. Really helps my channel out when you do that. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Rhett Shull, and I will catch you on the next one.